Good evening. I hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Bava Kama Daf Kuf Dalet. We are starting 3 lines from the bottom of Kuf Gimel Amud Beis. Let's go. We saw yesterday a seeming stira between our Mishnah and a Brisa. Our Mishnah had left us an implication that only if there was a shvua would the Gazlan have to chase down the Nigzal to give it back. But if there wasn't a shvua, he would not. And we couldn't figure out how the subsequent brisa of where a person stole from one of 5 people but doesn't know which one, we couldn't tell if we held like Rabbi Tarfon or Rabbi Akiva as it relates to our Mishnah. That was what we struggled with. So actually what we're going to do is start 5 lines from the bottom, even though we learned these before. I probably should have stopped there. It would have been cleaner. But nevertheless, we'll just go back 2 lines. I guess it's Chazara. I don't know. Maybe it's really learning it the first time. It's all the same. I see what you're focused on. I see that. Ella says the Gemara. How do we view the seeming stira between the implications of our Mishnah, that only with a shvua does one pursue the nigzal to give it back in person, versus the brisa, which has the machlokes Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon? The Gemara says, Kuv Gimel Amud Beis, 5 lines from the bottom, Olam Reb Tarfoni. Umode Reb Tarfon Heicha de Ishtaba. And even though the Brisa, which is found about 8 lines down on this page, doesn't speak about Shavua, we are going to interject and add in that Shavua really is a factor, even according to Rabbi Tarfon. And what that would mean is that much as Rabbi Tarfon was of the opinion that a person would take that which he owes, maniach gzela beinehem umistalik, that in a case where I steal from one of 5 people and I don't know who, I don't have to pay back 5x. I just have to pay back what I stole, and everybody can fend for themselves. But, says the Gemara, we're kind of adding in and stupping into the sheet of Reb Tarfon that Shvua is a factor. Says the Gemara, my time. Why would this make sense? Because perhaps Rabbi Tarfon learned the pasuk, that seemingly the word ashma, not seemingly, the word ashmaso refers to a korban asham, which is brought upon a false shvua when you lie during a shvua, and perhaps that's how he learns this, that the shvua is the machriya. And therefore, maybe our Mishnah is like Rabbi Tarfon, that really our Mishnah, which talks about a classical case of Gneva, is that when there's a shvua, then the Gazlan has to chase down the nigzal, even in Madai, even in Persia, which was far away, and we have to give it back to Biadaim. Rabbi Tarfon, seemingly, would agree in the case of Gazal me'echad mehen v'lo yada eza mehen, that he would agree in that case that a shvua makes the difference. But Rabbi Akiva, what would you do with this, Mari Makom? He would say, Omar afal gav delom lishtaba kanis. He would say that even though there isn't a shvua, still, we would say kanis. What was Rabbi Akiva's shita in our brisa? Rabbi Akiva's shita in the brisa at the top of the page is that he has to give back that iPad, the stolen device, to all 5 people, even though he only stole 1. But as he said that line of Musar yesterday, this is not the way to get out of doing an Avera. If you've done an Avera, you have to check off all the boxes. And if you stole from one and don't know who, the only way to properly fulfill the mitzvah of Heshivas Agzel Asher Gazal, the only way to do it is by paying back each person. That's what the Gemara says, and that's Rabbi Tarfon, the answer of Rabbi Tarfon. The Gemara then says 3 lines from the bottom, Rabbi Tarfon, Michti. Let's analyze Shishita. Hecha de mishtaba lo sagya. Rabbi Tarfon, you who said that you are maniach gzela beinehem umistalik, that you just drop what you stole, even though you're not sure it'll end up back in the right hands, you just put it down in front of all 5 people who are the claimants, and they say that really you stole from me. But the shvu is not enough, the lo hoda. What creates a scenario whereby we would say you have to chase down the nigzal is when there's a hoda. The shvua alone is not it. It's when you get caught red-handed and you say, yeah, you're right, I lied. That's when we have a case scenario that you have to chase down the nigzal. My area, vinishba. The vinishba alone is not enough to say that we should then have the Gazlan chase down the nigzal. It has to be that there was a hoda. So says the Gemara, according to Rabbi Tarfon, continuing the question, afilu v'lo shvua nami. Even had there not been a shvua, we would have a case scenario that he would have to go to Madai to chase down the nigzal to repay. The Tanya, the Brisa writes, Modeh Reb Tarfon be'omer l'shnayim. If a man, Rabbi Tarfon agrees that if a man says to two people, Gazalti echad mikem mana, I stole $100 from one of you. V'eini yodea eze mikem. I don't know from whom I stole. What? What's kind of funny?
I stole, but I don't know from who. Come on.
Why is that funny?
He knows he's feeling.
Nothing picked it out of his pocket.
No. There was $100 on the table. But let's say you and I go out to dinner.
The table, it's hefker anyway.
It's not hefker. It's not hefker. Let's say you and I go out to dinner together, and one of us decides to pay, and it was $100. That was the total cost. I take $100 out of my pocket. I put it on the table. This guy's a thief. He walks over. He's not a tzaddik. He just swipes it off the table. I didn't pay yet. Whose money did he steal? He has no idea. I say it's me. You're a liar. You say it's you. So that's our case. No, he knows. He knows he stole. He just doesn't know who he stole from. So in such a case, so no sem lazem moneh v'lazem moneh. In this case, Rabbi Tarfon pivots and agrees with Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was the one who said that the way we're motzi midei avera is by paying off all of the possible claimants. If that's true, says the Gemara, then he agrees. Why is this true? Shekvar hoda mipi atzmo. Because in such a case, he was modeh, and we therefore see that it's more about the hoda'ah than it is about the shvuah. So even though we tried to answer Rabbi Tarfon and insert into Rabbi Tarfon shvuah, even if you want to try that, that's not the right angle for Rabbi Tarfon. The right angle for Rabbi Tarfon from his own mouth, because the Bryce at the bottom of Kuf Gimel Amud Beis says as much, is that it's more about the Hodah than it is about the Shvuah. And therefore, we reject answer number 2 to our stira. So let's try answer number 3 on the top line of Kuf Dalet Amud Aleph. Amar Abaye, Shiny Mos Nisan. Our Mishnah is completely different than all of the other cases. Since in our Mishnah, I know that I stole from you, and I was modeh to that. Since I'm able, in theory, to give the money back to you, I could, in theory, go to Madai. It's as if the Nigzal were to say to the Gazlan, just hold on to my money, and you'll pay me when I get back, and that's considered acceptable. Hilkach nishba. Therefore, if he makes a shvua, afal gav de ka'amar le'yuli biyadcha, even if the Nigzal were to say, hold on to it, kevan de boy kapara lo sagi adamate liyade. With the shvua, he does have to go back and give it to him with his own 2 hands. This is the answer of Rava. But halo ishtaba, if there wasn't a shvua, he would not have to go to Madai. Havagabe pigadon, it would be like a pikadon, adasi v'shakile, and he could wait until the guy comes back. So in our Mishnah, it's all about the shvua. The other Mari Mikomos, namely, cases where I stole, but I don't know from whom, it could be from 2 people or from 4 or 5 or 10. In those cases, that's not our Mishnah. We basically are removing the question. We thought there was a stira, or at least a question from the implications of our Mishnah and the Brisa of Gazal Echad Michamisha Ve'eni Odeh Eze Mehen. And now the Gemara is saying, no, you guys got it all wrong. Those cases are not comparable. In our case, like Rava says, because I know who I stole from, which wasn't the case in the Brisa of Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Tarfon, therefore our case is different. And that brings us to the 2 dots on Kuf Daled Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, Itmar, Shliach she'asau be'edim. Oh, the 2 dots, thank you. The 2 dots reads, Lo yitain lo livno v'lo lishlucho. We had said in our Mishnah that when I, the Gazlan, steal, and to use Rava's answer that we just learned, and I know who I stole from, and I'm guilty, fine, then I have to go straight to Madai myself. I can't give it back to the son. I can't give it to a shliach. I have to do it myself. Itmar, says the Gemara, I know you just said you can't give it to a shliach, but what if shliach she'asau be'edim? What if it wasn't stam a shliach, that the nigzal sent a shliach to go collect from the Gazlan? What if we got all kinds of formal, and we got to edim, and we did it properly? The edim stood in front of the nigzal. The edim were then sent by the nigzal. Be'edim, you guys function like me. Please go out there and collect what the Gazlan stole from me. The Gemara says this is a machlokes amoraim, 9 lines down, Kuf Daled Amud Aleph. Rav Chizda Amar Have Shliach. This person is a full-fledged shliach, and therefore, let's say that you are the nigzal, the man I stole from, and you send a shliach to me, and I take that which I stole from you, and I hand it to this guy. And then in that guy's possession, something happens to the item. Who is held accountable? Is it me, because I didn't give it back to you yet? Or does the shliach function begeder shlucho shel adam kamoso? I did a bris today, said this to the father. I said this b'fem maleh in front of a whole room of secular people. I'm not allowed to do this bris. I cannot take another person's mitzvah. We learned about that with Yud Zehuvim. If you take someone's mitzvah, you owe them Yud Zehuvim. So I'm not allowed to do but you see like this nervous jitter happening over the room. And I'd be like, listen, it's great. I do it all the time. Every bris, I do it. Every secular bris. I'm like, so listen, guys, there's two options. The guy's name today was Tomer. I said, Tomer, you could man up, scrub in, and circumcise your own son. And then I just pause. And everybody's like, no, like this. It's awesome. It's so much fun. And he was Israeli. I dropped, I said, or you can make me your shliach. So he's like, I'm going to make you my shliach. Is that okay? I'm like, that's fine. Thank you very much. I wouldn't trust you anyways. And I didn't say this part, but if he's not Shomer Shabbos, then he's a mumar l'davar echad. He's dino kegoy in regards to being a moel. Some of the most uncomfortable moel conversations is when families hear that I'm out of town and they say, what do you think about reform moel so-and-so or reform mohelet so-and-so? And I tell them, if you're asking, I'll tell you, Shteit and Shulchan Aruch, that if it's a little bit of a spin, but if you don't keep the covenant of the Sabbath, you cannot be a practitioner of the covenant of circumcision. It's MS, but it's a spin. The real MS is that any Aveira that you're not, it's really any Isser, if you're not makbid on Lashon Hara, categorically, you're a mumar. You're a mumar l'davar echad and dino kegoy. It gets uncomfortable sometimes. And then I hear like a couple of weeks later that they use reform moel or mohelet so-and-so. Whatever, what can I do? You can't do more than... So then that's when I push off brises. Rabbi first gave me this massive kula that you can push off brisim when you have a chashash that they're going to use a moel that's not from, because better to have a bris on day 10 that's kosher than on day 8 that's not. Cares about day 8. So I tell families like this, I'm out of town, I'm sorry. Here are the 2, 3, 4 people that I refer. If they're not available, call me back. I want to make sure your son's bris is 100% kosher. It's better to push off the bris and use me until I return than it is to do it on time, but to have a question mark on your son's bris. And most of the time that works. Most of the time, not all the time. Okay, so I made this guy my shliach. He made me the shliach. I did the bris. So says the Gemara here too. What about the shliach for the nigzal? The nigzal says, please go to Phil, who's a gazlan, and bring back what he stole. So then, according to Rav Chizda, the guy's a full shliach. So once I, the gazlan, hand it back over to the shliach, as he brings it back to you, something happens, it's not my problem. I have fulfilled all of my responsibilities in regards to the mitzvah b'heshivas like zeh l'asher gazal. But Rabba Amar lo have shliach. No. If something goes wrong, you're responsible. This is the chakira. As to what level of shlichus is this? Rav Chizda Amar have shliach. Why is it that Rav Chizda says that the shliach is foolproof? Because lahachi tarach should be tarach. I specifically went out of the way to make this shliach with edim to ensure that it would be in my possession, says the nigzal, and that it would no longer be in the possession of the gazlan. However, Rabba Amar lo have shliach hachi kamar. You're right, inish mehemno. Obviously, the guy's trustworthy. You wouldn't send him to go collect the item that I stole, if he wasn't trustworthy. However, isamches samoch, if you want to rely on him, you can. I'm not stopping you from sending it in his hands because you obviously trust him if you set this up with Edim. But don't tell me that he's fulfilled the obligation. The obligation of Eheshives like Zelasher Gazal is only when it gets to the hand of the Nigzal. And the Shliach is middle of the road. He's doing his job, he's doing his Shlichus, but he's not begeder Shlucho Shel Adam Kamoso. It's like a unique... It's an abnormal paradigm in Shas to have this, where the shliach is able to function on behalf of the bailim, but he's not really shlucho shel adam kamoso. Then the Gemara says a third of the way down, asking a question. Tanan, we have a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Bava Metzia. We'll get there in 100 blot. Hashoel es hapara. A person borrows a cow, and I order it online, and now you're gonna deliver it to me. The shilcha biyad beno, the mash'il, the person lending, sends it over with his son or biyad avdo or biyad shlucho. Oh, biad beno, biad avdo, biad shlucho shel shoel. Either way, either the mashil is sending it or the shoel is sending it with messengers of various kinds. The halacha is if something happens umesa on the way, the halacha is pater. What does that mean? Pater what? Pater from who? Who's pater? The shoel is pater, right? Obviously, the mashil belongs to the mashil. What? There's no other option because the mashil is his animal. We mean pater. It just means that it's not birshus the shoel yet. These shlichim are not okay. Hai shlucho hechidami. What type of shliach were we discussing in this case of the mashil giving the para to the shoel? If there were no edim in yadinan, we would have no way of knowing. The guy who's the shoel, I wouldn't even know who you are. I don't know who you are unless I know edim for sure that they sent you. I have no idea who you are. Ella, it must be the asa be'edim b'ktani pater. We see that it's a kasha of Chizda. That Rav Chizda says that the edim are not complete because if the edim were complete, then the shoel, would be chayiv the second the mashil gives the para to the shaliach. That didn't happen. Elamaya, what must it be? It's a kasha on Rav Chizda because Rav Chizda said that shlucho shel adam kamoso, that the very moment when the nigzal sends me a shliach and I put the item that I stole into his hands, then I'm done. But clearly I'm not done over here. So stira. So that's a kasha on Rav Chizda. Says the Gemara, Kida Amar Rav Chizda. Beschiro ulakito. Hachanami beschiro ulakito. We're talking about a different kind of shliach over here. This guy was hired by you. He's like your employee. That's what a socher is. Beschiro ulakito. We'll see the application of this momentarily. But the first question against Rav Chizda is asked and answered. No problem at all. Halfway down on Kuf Daled Amud Aleph, Michael, I will get you tomorrow. Says the Gemara, lo yitain lo yitain. Tanan. Thank you. The Mishnah writes, and this one we just saw yesterday. We had said in our Mishnah, this is the Mishnah at the very top of Kuf Gimel Amud Beis and the very bottom of Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph. We had said, Lo yitain lo livno v'lo l'shlucha. You shouldn't do that. Well, why not? Right? Obviously, it's not going to work. Says the Gemara, Hai shlucha hechidami. What was the case of Edim over there? Either lo aso be'edim and no yad inan. They would not be valid Edim if you have no way of verifying that they're valid Edim. Elamai, it must be elalav da aso be'edim. So here too, it's another kasha on Rav Chizda where we see that the shlichus doesn't work over here. Yet Rav Chizda seems to say at the open of this Gemara, the two dots, that the shlichus does work. Again, kasha. Same answer to Gemara Rav Chizda b'schir lakito, that this guy is in fact an employee. And seemingly, I wouldn't have thought, but according to this line of reasoning, an employee functions more like me than a shliach. Even though we have a principle of shlucho shel adam kamoso, and I don't know how we intersect shlucho shel adam kamoso in this Gemara. This Gemara doesn't hold of that. What?
You don't pay a shliach?
Not necessarily. No, I mean you could, but then you're not a shliach. Then you're a socher. You're a worker. Maybe the opposite. Maybe not necessarily. And maybe if you pay a shliach, you're not a shliach anymore. Although that brings up the bris question again. These guys are dropping some bank, This guy's giving me some cash. So does that mean I'm not a shliach anymore? And it's not really true. I'm not a socher. They could pay zero. I would have been whatever. It wouldn't have mattered. I mean, it would have mattered, but okay.
We can't know that this guy is like he works for him in general, so that's how he knows who it is.
I'm not. Oh, you're saying that he knows him.
Right. That is known that this.
But how does that change the functionality of what happened? Function of the socher taking the money that works. Masha'en kein the shliach doesn't work. I hear you're solving a logistical issue of knowledge because the Eidim were there to verify to me the Gazlan. Oh, yes, I know you're an employee of the Nigzal. That's true. But it doesn't change the Mitzias that the Shlichus Pasha doesn't work, whereas it does by the Socher.
Shliach and Socher aren't necessarily like
mutually exclusive.
Right. Yeah.
Why would you say that?
Why would I say that? Aren't?
Yeah. They have different functions in halacha, potentially. That was what Michael and I were just talking about. Is do we say that a shliach is only a shliach because he wasn't paid? Maybe they pashat can't coexist. If you are a shliach, you can't be. I'm postulating. If you are a shliach, you can't be a socher. If you are an employee, a poel, maybe is a better word. I don't know. I don't know. This is why Daf Yomi is frustrating. Like I want to just sit here and figure this out. But there's different iterations of employment and shlichus. In this we know schiros and kablanis, which we saw a couple of days ago. There's not so posh. Okay, says the Gemara. We had also said aval. What would happen? Shliach sha'aso be'edim mai hachanami dehav shliach. Oh, so the Gemara turns it. The Gemara says you just left an implication that a shliach with edim, maybe a taka is shlichus, just like Rav Chizda. Says the Gemara, that can't be, because adatani seifa, what did we say in the seifa? Avanosin hu l'shliach bezdin. You can only give it to a shliach bezdin, but not to a regular shliach. And if this were to be true that you wanted to say dehave shliach, well, if that's true, then liflog v'lisni bididei. Bidida is a little bit more typical. And what the Gemara means to say here is that we always try to write our Mishnayos in the most concise form possible. So instead of giving me a Resha and a Seifa, give me a Resha and say Bamed Dvarim Amurim. That's always better. So that's what you should have done here. What should the Gemara have said? Bamed Dvarim Amurim is what we should be adding here in the Gemara. Bamed Dvarim Amurim Shliach Sha'aso Be'edim Hachanami Dehav Shliach. But we don't see that. So the Gemara says, Amrei, you're right. But the reason why we couldn't do that is because lo psikale. Not every case of shlichus is crystal clear. And let's see why. We're about 10 lines from the bottom. In regards to a shliach bezdin, lo shna asau nigzal velo shna asau gazlan. We don't care who appoints the shliach bezdin to be a shliach bezdin. It could be the nigzal and it could be the gazlan, have a shliach, psikale. That case is crystal clear. No one disagrees. And that's what our Mishnah wrote as well, that the Shliach Bezdin has a greater level of functionality than a Shliach Stam. That's for sure true. And now we can walk away money in the bank, is that if there's a Shliach Bezdin, his, what's the right word? Efficacy, his power, his capacity to represent, his proxy, whatever the right word is. He represents the Bailim perfectly, and that's psikale. However, what isn't psikale, and the reason why our Mishnah didn't say b'med dvarim amurim is that asau gazlan is that if the shliach shasau be'edim. However, if you have a regular shliach that was established by edim to be the shliach, so dechi asau nigzal hu dehabe shliach. That's only true when the nigzal is sending to get the shliach. However, so gazlan lo have shliach, and that is lo psikale. That's a bit of a discussion and not so clear. And therefore, we couldn't do the bamed dvarim amurim, because if we did the bamed dvarim amurim, we would have had a misnomer about this, because it's not a clear psak in regards to a shliach with edim if he was established by the nigzal or by the gazlan. Not clear. So therefore, we couldn't say the bamed dvarim amurim. And this, the Gemara says, is la'afuke mehatana detanya, to exclude what we are about to learn in this brisa. What's that? 5-6 lines from the bottom. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer, shliach bezdin she'asau nigzal. If we have a shliach bezdin, again, that higher level proxy, who is appointed by a nigzal, below asau gazlan. This is already different than what we saw, because a moment ago we said that a shliach bezdin is across the boards by the gazlan and by the nigzal. But Reb Shimon ben Elazar, this is how we know that it's not a pashat din. The Gemara says that if a shliach bezdin was made by the nigzal and not by the gazlan, asa'o gazlan v'shalach hala v'natal es shalom yado pater, and the nigzal then takes his item, he's pater. Rabbi Yochanan v'Rebbe Lazar da'amre tarvayu shliach she'asau edim. But the Amoraim on this brisa said that if you have a shliach that made edim, have a shliach. V'im tomar Mishnah seinu. Wait 1 second. Our Mishnah said no dice. Our Mishnah specifically said v'lo l'shlucho. What was the exact language? Yes, lo yitain lo levino v'lo l'shlucho. So how can you have Rav Yochanan and Rebbe Lazar seemingly piggybacking on Rav Shimon ben Elazar, saying that a shliach she'asau be'edim is a shliach, like Rav Chizda said at the top of the page? Hare, our Mishnah doesn't say that. Our Mishnah says v'lo l'shlucho. So the Gemara says, V'im tomar Mishnah seinu. No, b'mamtzi lo shliach. We found a shliach. The Amar le isli zuze gabe planya. I have money. I'm the nigzal, or I should say, you're the nigzal, and you say I have money by Phil. V'lo kamishadar lo, he's not giving me back. And I'm not asking you to be a proper shliach, but ischazi le, if you see him, please say the following: Dilma inishu delo mishkach lishturele. Perhaps he just forgot. He didn't realize that there was a way to get the money back. Now, by the way, we do things like this socially all the time. Oh, by the way, if you see someone in shul, can you please give back the AirPods? So now I'll ask the Lam Disha question. Are you a shliach or are you a quasi shliach? What are you? So this Gemara is a perfect example of living between the lines. There's an answer to the question. I'm just saying that the way it's framed here is that the shliach we're talking about is a shliach of opportunity. Is that if you happen to go there, can you please do this? It's like also similar to a case of shomer shemasher l'shomer if the case had been set up correctly. Okay, that's what the Gemara says. Inami, another possible answer is Kidder Reb Chizda, like we saw, B'schira ulakita, if you're an employee, that also is different. And therefore, that's how we would understand Rav Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar, who said that a shliach she'aso be'edim have shliach, we have to create a new kimta. Either that shliach was a shliach of opportunity or he was an employee. Last few words on Kuf Daled Amud Aleph. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Says the Gemara. All right, maybe you won't make. All right, we'll see. I don't know. We'll see. I love you. I don't know. We'll see what happens. We'll see. So we have a din, says the Gemara, the early Amoraim. It's Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Remember that Shmuel, of course, learned by both Rav and Rabbi Yehuda learned by both Rav and Shmuel very uniquely. Ein mishalchen ma'os b'diyukni. You're not allowed, says the Gemara, a shomer. This requires Rishonim to learn. Even b'pashtus, it's very difficult to learn this without commentaries. But the Svarim write, Ein mishalchen ma'os b'diyukni. If you have a shomer who's watching something, he should not send the monies b'diyukni. Let's take a look at Rashi on the top of the page. Masar lo bal hapikadon l'shaliach. The bal hapikadon, the guy was watching the item. He gives something to a shliach and he gives it with simanim. Because of lo chosamo be'igeres, and he signs it with his own name. It says, "I signed it with my signature." U'misara lo v'amar lo lech v'Yisrael ploni. Go show this to the guy. He'll recognize my signature. V'yiten l'chamosh yesh li biyado. So says the Gemara, no dice. Ein mishalchen mos b'dyukni ve'afilu eidin chasumin aleh. Even if the documentation that has my signature is verified by others, still doesn't work. It's the same din of the Mishnah of there's no shliach. You have to give it back directly. You can't go over to the nigzal and say pay. The nigzal can't send this case b'dyukni. You're not allowed to do that because it's a violation of our Mishnah, which says below b'shlucho. And says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Im Eidin Chasumin Aleha Mishalchen. I disagree. The diukni is okay, provided that you have Eidim. Amrei l'Shmuel Maita Kanta. They said to Shmuel, well, what exactly would you like to do? Like, how is this guy supposed to get his stuff back? Sometimes the logistics are impossible. The only way to get this done is b'diukni. You're creating an impossible scenario. Says the Gemara, Kiha de Rabbi Abba. This case actually kind of happened. Have a masik zuze b'de Rabbi Yosef bar Chama. Let's get all the names right. Rabbi Abba had money by Rabbi Yosef bar Chama. Omar le. Did I write over here? Yeah, I'm just looking for my note that I clearly didn't write. All right. So Amar le says the Gemara le Rav Safra. He says to Rav Safra, Bahade de Asis, I sinhu nehali. I'm going to send him over there. I want you to give him the money. Ki azalahasam, when he got there, Amar le Rava Bere. Rava, the son of Rav Yosef, said, Mikasav lachis kabalti, that it was received on my behalf. Amar le lo, it doesn't say that. Oh, so he says, Ihachi zil beresha, go back and have him rewrite it, V'yichtov lach b'his kabalti, that it should say that you received it. L'sof, Amar le, he said to him, Rava said to him, Ikasav lach namis kabalti lav klumhi. Who cares if it says he's kabalti? Dilma adaosis shachiv Rabbi Abba. Perhaps Rabbi Abba is no longer like Rabbi Abba. Again, the backdrop of the story is that Rabbi Abba was an old man and not doing well. It doesn't say if he was a goses or shchiv meira, but he was old. He was old, fine. It says the Gemara, v'naflu zuze kami yasmein. Perhaps even though he wrote he's kabalti, but if he died, then the money falls to the hands of the Yorshim, he's kabalti the Rabbi Abba lav klumim. And then this case, similar to our case, which we raised earlier, this is where we would say, Ve'elamai takanta. How do we solve this problem? So the Gemara says, what do we do in cases like this, where the Nigzal wants his property back? There is no easy way for him to get his property back. What should he do? So the Gemara falls back on a principle we learned in Maseches Ksubis, and that is go find a property that has achrayas. That's always a good thing to do. Property is ein nigzeles. Zil nikanin hulach agav ara v'ta at kasuv lan his kabalti. Your his kabalti on a piece of property does work even if the person would die, because the property, even if it's yorshim, it's not cash, and that would actually work. Yihad Rav Papa Habamasik Tracer Alfe Zuze Be Chozai. He was owed $12,000 by someone from Chozai, Zuzim. Akninhu Nehalele Rav Shmuel Bar Abba Agav Asefa de Besa. And he did this transaction with Rav Shmuel Bar Abba by the threshold, by the door of his house. Ki asa nafach la'ape ad tavach. That what happened is that he did this ad tavach up until the place of tavach. So again, there's more going on here, but the point is that we do allow for the his kabalti to work in regards to karka, and that actually does work, and that would be the solution for this sheet of Shmuel at the top of the page, who holds ein mishalchen mos b'diukni ve'afilu edim chasumin aleh. That brings us to the next two dots, about a third of the way down on Kuf Daled Amud Beis. We had spoken about a whole bunch of very minutia type of cases of no sein lo esa keren, and this is a case that we can find in the Mishnah a couple of blot ago on the bottom of Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph. So we had said if the no sein lo esa keren, I'm just looking back now in the Mishnah, if the Gazlan had paid the keren, he had paid the principal, but velo nasan lo esa chomesh, but he hadn't paid the financial punishment. So then we said in such a case that the Gazlan doesn't have to go hand the chomesh over to the hands of the nigzal. That's what the Gemara says. So now let's analyze that. Alma, it seems from over here that chomesh is mamonahu. We're engaging with chomesh as though it's mamon and not a knas. How do we know? Because we're saying, should he go? Should he not go? I understand the keren. He didn't pay the chomesh. We're handling about it like it's mamon. So says the Gemara, ve'im mais mishalme leyorshin. And the same thing should be true, is that if the man dies, if the man to whom I owe chomesh dies, so then mishalme leyorshin, the yorshin are then other way. The mais mishalme le yorshin. If there's a debt, then he has to pay the yorshin. Vitnan nami, halfway down on Kuf Daled Amud Beis, we have another Mishnah. Nasan esa keren v'nishba ala chomesh. Let's say I'm the Gazlan, I paid for the principal of what I stole. I stole $100, here's the $100. The chomesh is $25, I make a shvua about the chomesh and I lied. Hare mosef chomesh ala chomesh, we spoke about this idea yesterday, that if you lie about chomesh, you convert that payment into keren and then you have a new chomesh. Alma chumsha mamona. We also see over here this idea of chumsha mamona. V'tanya nami hachi. We have a brisa that triples down on this idea. It goes less chaveru v'nishpa lo umeis. If a person steals something from his friend and dies, yorshin mishalman karen v'chomesh. The yorshim of the gazlan have to pay the principal and the chomesh, but uptur min ha'asham. Why are they pater from the asham if their father made the shvuah? Because they didn't make the shvuah. The shvuah was an individual consequence. So even though the father stole and didn't pay back the keren, and he made a shvuah about the chomesh and he lied, so the yorshim are on the hook for 2 out of 3, but not all 3. They're on the hook for keren and chomesh because that's monetary. Mashe ein kain, when it comes to the korban asham, that is due to a shvuah, but they didn't make the shvuah. That was made by the father. The Yorshem b'nei shlume chumsha de'avu havu. How can you say, says the Gemara, that Yorshim, those who inherit, are obligated to pay the chomesh of their father? Uraminhu, skipping the parentheses, almost 2/3 of the way down, we have a brisa that seems to disagree with this. Again, we had said that Yorshim should pay chomesh. Why would that be? Adayin ani omer, I would say, emasai einu meshalim chomesh al gezel aviv. When would I say that you're not going to pay chomesh for the theft of my father, for the theft of one's father? Bisman shelo nishba lo hu velo aviv. When would it be that we would say that there is no chomesh? When there's no shvua, not of the gazlan, not of me, the yoresh, and not of the aviv. But hu velo aviv, if one person made a shvua, namely if the gazlan made a shvua, if the yoresh made a shvua, or aviv velo hu, or hu ve'aviv, or if they both make a shvua minayin, that this would be the din. Tamlomar asher gazal asher ashak V'hulo gazal below ashak. He would not pay chomesh in those cases. So this is a kasha, because it seemed to be pretty clearly that the yorshim have to pay chomesh, but the Gemara says you should not be paying chomesh. That's what the pasuk says. You're not the thief. Chomesh seemingly is now not mamona. Seemingly now it's like direct and it's knas ish. It's like similar. You can't say that my father is a thief and he's, I don't know, why am I paying chomesh for his crimes? That's not my problem. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Nachman, lo kasha, kansha hoda, kansha lo hoda. Similar to where we started today, it's more about the hoda, not about the shvua. Where there is a shvua, that's one thing. Where there isn't a shvua, that's different. And lo hoda, if there was no hoda, karen nami lo mashalim. And the yorshim, if there was no hoda, if the father didn't admit, then the burden of paying back does not go down to the children. If there's no hoda, you're completely patur. Says the Gemara, "V'chi tema hachanami de lo meshalem, v'ha midekama hadar achomesh lememer de keren meshalem." You might have thought that that's only talking about chomesh, but that implies that keren has to be paid. The Ode Tanya, we have another brisa. V'adayin omer emasay meshalem keren al gezel aviv bizman shenishbahu v'aviv. When is keren paid? And that's what the child might have to pay, because that might pass down from generation to generation, where a father's theft will fall as a burden to his child, and the child will have to pay the chomesh. So that's bizman shenishbahu v'aviv. That's only if there's a shvua. But aviv v'lo hu v'lo aviv, lo hu v'lo aviv, minayin that the child would not have to pay. Talmud mar gzera v'oshek avedu bikadon yesh Talmud. We don't know what yesh Talmud means. That's a very weird phrase. But it seems to be that in this case that you would only be chayiv on keren under certain circumstances. So the Gemara says, what is this phrase of yesh Talmud? And we'll see in a moment that it was an auditory misperception. We don't know what we heard. What does yesh Talmud sound like? Yesh Talmud. You should pay. So that's what the Gemara says was going on here. V'yasi Ravuna v'kamar lahashmaisa. Amar le Rabba Berei. Yesh Talmud ka'amar mar. Namely, we have a Masorah here. We have a Marimako. Oh, Yishtalmu ka'amar mar. Says the Gemara, unlike what we would have thought, Amar le, Yesh Talmud ka'amina, umi ribuya dekrai. All we're saying is that we have a Marimakum over here. And it's just an interesting misunderstanding of the words. Amre elamai lo hoda. So what would be the case if he was not hoda? Lo hoda aviv v'hoda beno. It must be that in that case where it says lo hoda and the child is chayav to pay keren, that's where the father was not modeh, but the son knows that the father stole, and the son was modeh to the keren. Fine, but then if the son was involved and he made a shvua that all of this happened, that the chomesh wasn't paid, so then maybe we should say he should pay it. So Amrei, it must be b'she'ein gzela kayemes. It has to be that the gzela is nowhere to be found, and that's why he's not paying anything. Says the Gemara, well, that's adorable, but ibishe'ein gzela kayemes afilu karen nami l'mashale. We should say that the karen and the chomesh are the same in that if the reason why you're not paying one is because you can't find the stolen item, you shouldn't pay the other either. As a yoresh, we're talking about the next generation. Lo tzricha de'ika achrayas. We're talking about an item that was stolen, but where there's achrayas, where there's a lien on a property. Okay, that's still fine. But v'chi'ika achrayas nechasim mai have. Who cares? Even if there's achrayas nechasim, it's a malve al pehi. If you're saying there's achrayas, and the Gemara makes an odd assumption that this is all equivalent to a milve al peh, because it's really not a halva at all. It's really a gzela. We're equating it to a milva al peh because the Yerusha passed down to the child, and therefore the Yorshim shouldn't pay a thing. Says the Gemara, Amrei b'she amad bidin, that we're talking about a case where a bezdin paskined this way, top of Kufhei Amad Aleph, and the Gemara says, b'she amad bidin, but if in fact you're amad bidin, afilu chomesh nami mishalim, if bezdin obligates you to pay the keren, you should also be paying the chomesh. Again, you can't easily separate the keren and the chomesh for the yorshim. Rav Huna the Rabbi Yoshua v'she'ein mishalman chomesh al kfiras shibud karkos. The reason why we distinguish is because on the one hand you're obligated to pay as a yoresh because there was a property with a lien that was connected to your theft. However, we're not mishalem chomesh even while you are mishalem keren when there's kfira by shibud karkos. It's just a very unique, isolated din that Chumash is not paid when I am rejecting something about this payment when it's connected to karka. And as a last response, Rava Amar Hacha b'maya skinan kagon shahaya diskia shel aviv mufkedes biyad acherim. My father had a purse of some sort, some type of collection with an item that happened to have had something in it that was stolen, and I didn't know that. Then Karen Mishalem Daha'ise, when we finally end up looking in that diskia, in that purse, we see that the item was there. But Chomesh lo mishalim. Why would we not have paid? This is a very unique ukimta, where somebody says, they say to Ruvain, hey, your father, Yaakov, stole. And Ruvain says, my father did not steal. And what they end up finding is that the item was in fact in a bag in the attic that his father had taka stolen. But the Chi'ishtaba, when the shvua happened about the theft, because the child didn't know that it was stolen, bikushta ishtaba. From his perspective, he was telling the truth. He wasn't hiding anything. He really thought his father didn't steal. So listen to this fascinating thing. If I make a shvua under the assumption that I assume I'm telling the truth, I am hooked up to a monitor, to a lie detector test. Ligabe me, I think I'm telling the truth. I'm wrong, but I don't know that I'm wrong. The Gemara says that the ishtaba b'kushta ishtaba, the halo hava yoda, and therefore you're putter from chomesh. What that means is that I was wrong. I lied inadvertently, but klape me, I was telling the truth. I really thought I was right. I didn't go into Bezdin thinking, there was no ruse. I just went in. They're taking my blood pressure. They're looking at my pupil dilation. I'm perfect. I got it. I do it just right. So this is fascinating that you could literally lie in Bezdin and no problem. You Pasha didn't know. You're putter on chomesh because as it relates to you, you did not do anything wrong. You didn't even know your father stole it. After your shvua, they go up in the attic in your house. They're looking for... it's a shvua that the father didn't steal because that patters him from chomesh. Yeah. I assume that's the shvua. Because he's obligated to pay for it. And they say your father stole something on January 10th of 1952. And he says, I was there that day. My father did not steal. And he was wrong. I guess. I don't know what shvua is. I don't know.
Right.
So clear and say, hey.
The father was a sneaky guy. I don't know what to tell you, but the kid's making a shvua. The Yoresh is making a shvua. The Ishtaba Bakushta Ishtaba. The Halo Hava Yoda. So therefore he's putter from Chomesh. Yeah. It's just so the Rashi, there's a 12-line Rashi, which is not small. It's not small. It's not a very difficult Rashi, but we're not going to learn it now. But you can take a look at it and see if it will help. Tomorrow night, in Mirza Hashem, we will pick up with Daf Kufhei. Oh my gosh. Well, we'll do whatever we do. Next week, I'm out of town Sunday night and Monday night and probably Tuesday night, but I'll keep you posted. Wishing you all a beautiful night.